Hello there, it's Richard Shepherd from LeaseOptionsMastery.com, the site I run with my two partners, Shimon Rudik and Hanif Khan. Now today, you and I are going to talk about what happens when a motivated seller makes a demand upon you that might make your life difficult. Now when you start doing option agreements, making proposals to motivated sellers, you'll come across a range of problems that you need to solve because you are going to be, for them, and for the time being, the authority on using options to help them out of a sticky situation. So what we're going to discuss here is what happens when they insist that you have to buy their property. Now let me go through what option agreements are. Basically, they give you the right, but not the obligation, to buy the property at any time over a fixed time frame. For instance, a motivated seller, somebody who really wants to sell their house, may allow you 10 years to buy the property at today's price. You can buy it within that 10 years if you want to, or you can choose not to. Now obviously if the market doesn't improve, or if a prison's just been built next door, then you may choose not to, and that's your right within the option agreement. You'll just let the option agreement lapse. So with the option agreement you have the right to buy the seller's property, as well as the right not to buy the seller's property, and the seller understands that. However, in other situations, the seller may want the security that you definitely buy the property within the option term. Now please note, we're not talking about a straight purchase where they insist you buy the property right now. We're talking about them insisting that you buy the properties before the end of the option term. Now if this happens to you, then if the alarm bells aren't ringing, then they should be. The problem with taking on the obligation to buy is that the only way to do that legally is to exchange contracts. So as soon as you exchange contracts, then you're creating a recordable transaction that has other repercussions. The long and the short of it, and while the lease option gurus are blinding you with the latest buzzwords like long stop completions, etc., it's worthwhile contemplating the fact that exchanging contracts may not, in specific circumstances, be so great for you. They also may not be so great for your seller either. Okay, now this really is the elephant in the room that nobody likes to talk about. If you ask most of the lease option gurus about this, you'll invariably be fobbed off with an answer about how the property is only costing you £1. But in actual fact, the property is costing you £400,000 to buy, and you're legally obliged to complete on it. So if you're not in a position to be able to complete for whatever reason, then you could be sued for breach of contract and any consequential loss or damages. In addition to making the exchange, you are setting out a recordable transaction which could have big stamp duty issues for you. So on this £400,000 property, even though you're not buying the property just yet, because you're exchanging contracts, the stamp duty is due right now. On a £400,000 house, then that could mean you getting walloped for £12,000. So this probably isn't ideal for you. In addition to this state of affairs, if the seller is a landlord, for instance, then you could also be setting up a major capital gains tax liability for them upon the sale of the property. Just to take a moment to consider this, is the fact that you should always behave ethically with your seller. So you should really warn them that they might incur a capital gains tax just by setting up the obligation to buy the property rather than the option right now. Now this is the conundrum that we found ourselves with the lease option that we were doing. So what do? On the one hand, you want to do the deal. This is your dream house. On the other hand, you don't really want to shell out £12,000 right now, so this £12,000 could make this deal a deal breaker. You stand to lose hundreds, or in our case £1,000 a month in positive cash flow, unless you're able to solve it. On the other hand, perhaps you don't really want to lose that cash flow over the security that you're definitely going to buy the property. The other thing is that in addition, you really don't want to be missing out on the hundreds of £1,000s in back-end profit. Now we stood to lose £100,000 in back-end profit. What are you going to do? This is what we did. What we really did with them is just to sit them down and to explain to them that as we've established, the only way to take on the obligation to buy the property is by exchanging contracts. So we explained to them that this actually sets up a trigger. It sets up a capital gains tax liability for the seller and also a stamp duty problem for us. So what we did is to tell the seller, "Hi Malcolm, do you know what? We'd really like to buy your house. And all circumstances being equal, there's no way that we'd pass on the opportunity to do this. But the only way to force us to buy the house in 10 years' time is to exchange contracts. Now, unfortunately, it's not great for us, and actually it's not great for you either. For us, if we exchange contracts, then we'd have to pay thousands of pounds in stamp duty right now. And as you know, there's very little in this property for us right now. By our calculations, you bought this property at £100,000, and we've got the option to buy it for £280,000. Now, the problem is that as soon as we exchange contracts, the capital gain on this property is £180,000, which means that just by exchanging contracts, you could be liable for £40,000 to £50,000. Now, we're not tax advisors, so you'd really need to seek tax advice on this. We'd like to do the right thing by you, and this is why we've brought it to your attention. Is it possible that we could agree to the following? What we'd really like to do is buy your property. And all things being equal, there's no way that we're not going to buy your property in 10 years. In fact, we're so sure that we're going to buy your property within that time frame, this is what we'd actually like to set up with you. If we don't buy your property over the next 10 years, then we will be contractually obliged to give you £50,000. How does that sound to you? Now, in actuality, our sellers were delighted with this, and we've now got the option to buy the property. So when you're negotiating these contracts, you've got to remember that you're dealing with people. What we've been able to demonstrate here is that we're not only thinking about ourselves, we're also thinking about them. By not exchanging contracts, we've escaped both capital gains tax right now and also stamp duty considerations. We've addressed their real concerns and given them the security that they were craving. We've also stopped some way short of taking on the obligation to buy their property, and most importantly, we've created a win-win situation for both of us. Now, in our advanced classes, we also teach you how you can protect yourself with this type of arrangement and minimize our financial risk. Now, if this video has been helpful to you, do take a moment to just make a comment below. Click on the comments link and also click on the like this video, because one of the things that we're doing is really setting up a community of people that are doing lease options in the UK and driving this whole movement forward. The more this whole thing becomes mainstream, the happier investors will be. So you want to be part of that. This is Richard Shepherd. Happy hunting.